Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Sailing Antarctica, Wonders of the White Continent, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Marlo Shaw. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Marlo, take it away.
Well, thank you so much for that, Rob. Thank you everybody for being here. What an honor to be sitting in front of you to talk about this really special trip that Natural Habitat Adventures does. A carbon neutral journey to the white continent at the end of the earth. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to speaking to you guys about this. So, with that, I will give you an official Antarctica welcome with a little photo of an Adelie penguin, which is one of the characters that we might meet if you end up coming down to Antarctica with us on these really magnificent sailboats. So, I'm going to get into the nitty gritty here shortly, but first I might just give myself a little bit of an introduction. So I've been an expedition leader for Natural Habitat Adventures since 2018. I've had the honor of being a part of many of our polar programs, including our polar bear trips, our Northern Lights trips, trips to our Greenland base camp. I've been a part of our Antarctica program going on 33 years now. And I've also done a bunch of work on the west coast of British Columbia, including our inaugural Haida Gwaii trip. So if anyone's tuning in from a trip that we've done before, hello. I'm glad that you're here, and it's great to reconnect again. And anybody else, I hope that we get a chance to travel together in the future. Oh, I've been to Australia too. I've done some of our Australia trips. Anyways, I'll tell you this. I'm a Canadian, and I've spent some time in the subpolar regions in my life growing up, and I feel really honored to be able to work in both the southern and the northern polar region. So this is me on the left side there in Antarctica in the same outfit, just about, as the photo on the right side. Me as part of our Greenland program. And so these places I hold really near and dear to my heart, and I think that they really do bring a very unique aspect to travel, in that you are just in such a vast and remote place when you're in either of these locations. And I find that it can mean for very meaningful experiences for our travelers. And I hope that I can convey some of that today. So I'm going to set the stage a little bit. Actually, I'm going to bring in a little quote from Mr. David Attenborough about Antarctica specifically. He says, "It's a place where it's possible to see the splendors and the immenseness of a natural world at its most dramatic. And what's more, witness them almost exactly as they were long before human beings ever arrived on the surface of this planet. And may it remain so." And I know every person that's part of this call, whether you've been to Antarctica or not, you probably have that strong feeling of, yes, we need to have very wild places, and we need to keep them wild. That's why you're someone who cares about conservation, and probably why you're connected to Natural Habitat Adventures. And so I can only imagine that folks that are part of this call or who have traveled with us have thought about this place. Yes, it's very inspiring. So I'm going to start with a bit of a story, and this is from a trip that I did 2 seasons ago. And I'm going to set the scene for you. We were sailing across the Gurlash Strait in the sailboat called Ocean Tramp. So she's a 66-foot ketch. We were all having lunch around the salon table underneath the deck, and we were just chatting about how wonderful our time at Paradise Harbor, which is a real place, was. And we were kayaking by beautiful seabird cliffs, and we were just reminiscing below deck when our captain poked his head down and said, "We've spotted orcas off the bow." And of course, no matter where you've traveled in the world, if you see an orca, that is a very special wildlife sighting. They are incredible animals. They're very beautiful, and they fill very unique niches depending on where they're living. And so, of course, we didn't hesitate at all. We grabbed everybody, and everybody grabbed their jackets and their cameras, and we're running up on deck so that we can hopefully get a glimpse of these really special creatures. And as we get up onto deck, we can see them at a distance, and you could tell it was a group of easily more than a dozen individuals, and they were coming alongside a humpback whale. And we could identify from a distance that they were probably the type B2 Gurlash Strait orca. So we're watching in parallel to them for a while, and then we decided that we had a really nice viewing, and we just shut off the engines and just let ourselves drift a little bit in the Gurlash. And when that happened, something really, really special occurred. And I'm going to show you a little video of that encounter. And this is some footage from concierge that maybe some of you guys have had the chance to chat with on the phone. His name is Jack Reppy, and he was on this trip during a site inspection, and he took this footage of these magnificent animals that changed direction and brought their young individuals close to the sailboat, and really checked us out. And we ended up having this really incredible encounter with them where people were able to be eye level with these creatures. Um, and you can see that there's some playful behavior here. All of you guys, I'm sure, are animal enthusiasts, and so you can kind of see this behavior of really we're checking each other out in this moment. And I'm sure Rob will let me know if this video is not playing for you guys, but I can see it here on my screen. And you can, I'm in the background as well, just like smiling ear to ear because I had never seen anything like this before. And it was just really a moment of pure magic. You can see a series of individuals from this particular pod coming, checking out the ship, and then leaving, and then a group coming behind them, and then also kind of checking out, interacting with the ship, and eventually swimming underneath the ship and checking us out as well on their way by. You can see their eyes coming up and looking at us, and every single person on board, you can see them just like completely in awe. And I don't really find that many opportunities to show this video to people, but the reason why I'm doing it is not because something like this is going to happen on every single sailing adventure that we do down in Antarctica, but the realm of possibility is huge. And this particular day was one of the highlight wildlife encounters for me for my entire life. It was really something. It just wiped a tear out of my eye in that video. So it's really special. Thank you to Jack for that footage. And for the wildlife nerds that are among you, I might just give you a little bit more of a backgrounder on those critters that we just saw. They are individuals that are part of the Gurlash, or the small type B orca. And so if you look at this slide that I have in front of you now, you've got 4 rows of killer whales, okay? And the first 2 rows are killer whales that you can see in Antarctica. So if you kind of come down, you have Antarctica type A, the pack ice killer whale, or type B, and then you have the small type Bs, and then you have the type Cs and the type Ds. And typically on the trips that we would run, if we were going to see orca, we would see the small type Bs. They're much more common in the Gurlash, although you could see other individuals, especially if you were on a trip that was going to be crossing the Drake. Not many people know this, but these orca, are separated because of different cultures, different languages, and different niches, different foods that they are acquiring. And certainly there's an abundant amount of research that's happening around the world and down in Antarctica to make an argument that these are actually different species, not just different ecotypes, because they truly are not breeding with each other. So pretty fascinating, and we could do a whole presentation for an hour just on the killer whales down in Antarctica, but there's more that I want to show you, so I'm going to continue on after that bit of a story. So let's get to place. Let's talk about Antarctica. So I'm going to actually just bring us into Google Earth here. I'm definitely a map and a chart person. I have some background in geography, but I also, just as a sailor, I've worked on 6 different vessels. I really think it's good to have a visual of the place that you're going to. So here's the southern continent. It's almost 14 million square kilometers of continental landmass here. If you can see my mouse, I'm just going to point out a couple of different what are called ice shelves. So this is the Ross Sea down here and the Weddell Sea up here, where you have essentially this enormous mass of ice that's spilling out radially from the center of the Antarctic continent. And as it's doing that, it's spilling out onto the ocean and creates these massive flat expanses of ice that are essentially sitting over top of the ocean water. And those are really unique places that still exist in Antarctica and would have existed much more broadly during the last glaciation. Uh, this place is a place that is covered 98% in ice. So, we're seeing it all white. It's not just because it's snowy, but it's because it is just full of ice. And when I say full of ice, I say that there are, mountain ranges that are underneath this ice mass that aren't showing full prominence here because the ice is up to 3 kilometers thick in some areas, which is pretty amazing to think about. Right. Other kind of features that we can see if we're thinking about Antarctica, I'm going to bring us up to the Antarctic Peninsula, which is this landmass here. Between the Antarctic Peninsula and Tierra del Fuego, which is the southern tip of South America, we've got this vast expanse of open water, which is about 600 miles or so. Is the shortest distance if you're wanting to sail from somewhere else, a different continent, to Antarctica. And so this is the route that the majority of trips that are going to Antarctica will take. And the majority of trips, if I'm talking about, global tourism to Antarctica, are going to be on the peninsula area. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, obviously, proximity and logistics are slightly easier. But two is it's an extremely special ecological area because the weather and the current that circulates around Antarctica is going in the direction that we can see here from west to east. So if you can see my mouse west to east, but it's actually kind of going in a circle around the continent. And it's just like this continuous flow of both weather, wind, and oceanic current. And for those folks who know anything about the ocean and marine life, then you can probably already see that the continental shelf of Antarctica, as it reaches down into the Drake, you would have this massive upwelling that's happening here in the peninsula, where the current is pushing the very nutrient-rich waters that are deep in the Drake Passage up to the surface, which provides, the building blocks for life. You've got photosynthesizing organisms near the surface, and then, of course, all of the other critters and zooplankton and krill that love to feed on those photosynthesizing organisms or diatoms. And yeah, you all probably know this. Krill and zooplankton bring larger critters, including an enormous volume of whales and, of course, penguins. So this whole continent is known to be home to potentially up to 20 million breeding pairs of penguin. There's several different species that you can see, 3 of which would be more common to see on our particular trip that would be on the peninsula itself. One other feature that is hard to ignore here is you can see that there's this kind of finger that's pushing across the Drake Passage. So this is the Scotia Arc and the Scotia Plate. And essentially you could just think of, the continental drift equivalent of someone pushing a finger between the Antarctic Peninsula and South America. Now, again, we could do a whole presentation on the tectonics in this area, but it's created also quite a unique area that in this whole Scotia Arc region, where you can see that there's a series of islands where there would also be that upwelling effect. And so some of you might have heard about trips to Antarctica that include an island called South Georgia. This is South Georgia right there. Okay, but our trips, we start in one of 2 locations. So there's a couple of different ways that we do this. We have to get from point A to point B over here. And one way is to sail and one way is to fly. So if we were going to sail across the Drake, we would start our journey in Ushuaia. I'm going to see if I can bring us in there a little bit further. So we start in the Argentinian side of Tierra del Fuego. And you can see Ushuaia here. Smaller community of less than 100,000 people. It's got a kind of very cool expedition mentality kind of vibe, I would say, to the town itself. This is where you would meet your ship Australis. So Australis is associated with these sail fly trips or fly sail trips. And if you were on the first trip of the season with Australis, then you might be coming on board here and then come sailing through the Beagle Channel, which is right here. You can see a number of different birds that you would not see in Antarctica along that particular channel, which is really exciting. Then you would come out onto the tip of South America, take a peek at Cape Horn. Really, really famous location because, of course, you've got the merging of both the Atlantic waters and the Pacific waters, because you have currents that are coming together, and you also have an unlimited fetch. So for those folks who are sailors, you'll know the word fetch means the distance over water where wind can accelerate. And if your wind is going in a circular pattern around the continent of Antarctica, then conceivably it might have an unlimited fetch, which means that it can be the windiest place in the world. So when you have big winds and mixing currents, then that creates a place that can be really, really tricky when it comes to navigating via boat. And that's one of the reasons why it is such a famous area. And there's a lot of, quite famous stories of earlier explorers making their way through here. The great thing about our trip is that we are not in 1771 when Cook was trying to circumnavigate the southern land. We have really, really good forecasting now. So we can see weather patterns as they come in. And the trip that we do is built in such a way that there is time for us to either wait out a day or leave slightly early if the weather window is as such that we want to be going through the Drake Passage when the seas are going to be a little bit more kind to us. Those folks who have had friends that have crossed the Drake Passage in any number of vessels, they've probably either talked about the Drake Lake or the Drake Shake. So yeah, there's a variety of conditions that you can go in, though the biggest Drake Shake that you might go in a larger vessel is just a timeline that we would just avoid. We would end up just delaying a little bit. So that we can make sure that you guys are having a more comfortable crossing. For folks who sail, I'm sure you would recognize that as soon as you come across Cape Horn, you would start to feel a little bit of sea, and you would start to feel the swell coming through Drake Passage. Even if there's virtually no wind, you're still going to have movement during that crossing. That crossing on the sailboat that moves at about 8 to 9 knots will be about 2.5 days or so. And it depends on where on the peninsula you're going to end up making your first landing. That's going to be one of the big dictating factors. And then the other is going to be the direction of the wind. So if you're on Australis and you're crossing the Drake, and you are either someone who does really well with ship movement and you're up on deck and you're spotting albatross and you're looking for blue whales, or you might be someone who just really wants to say that they did it, but they don't really feel comfortable in sea, and that's okay too. We have those folks as well, and they might spend a little bit more time below deck. You're going to come to the midpoint of the Drake Passage, and this is a really significant spot because it's called the Antarctic Convergence. And so again, this circular pattern that's coming around the continent is creating a very globally unique ecological boundary where in the course of an afternoon while you're traveling on the sailboat, you're going to be transferring from waters that is 2 degrees different in temperature. And in the ocean, that's really, really significant. And you feel it. The weather's a little bit different. The temperature of the water is different, but also the creatures that you could see are also different. So it's quite a fascinating thing and kind of special to be able to cross the Antarctic Convergence on a ship. And then you may make landing either on the South Shetland Islands or maybe a little bit further down south on the peninsula, depending on that wind angle and what your expedition leader is trying to accomplish here. And then if you're sailing across, then you have about seven plus days to explore the actual peninsula itself. Every day you're going to be making multiple landings, or you're going to be checking out historical sites, or maybe doing some zodiac cruising. And then you'll end your trip here in King George Island, where there's a small airstrip that I will show you in a moment. Yeah, and if you were going to start your trip from Punta Arenas, if you wanted to fly both directions, then you are likely going to go and meet a ship called Ocean Tramp. Punta Arenas is larger than Ushuaia. It's more than 100,000 people in this spot, and it's also on the Chilean side. Okay, and you're here in the Magellanic Strait. You'll meet your guide there. We'll spend a day in Punta Arenas, and then we will plan to fly. And we take a small plane. By small, I mean 60 passengers or so. Like, it's not going to be a tiny little prop plane or a Cessna or something like that. We'll fly across the Drake Passage. We'll wave at the convergence from up above. And then we end up in this group of islands called the South Shetland Islands. And on this largest island in that group is called King George Island. There is a series of research stations here. I'm just going to bring us in a little bit closer. There's a Chilean station, a Chinese station, a Russian station, and there is an airstrip here as well. And so you can see the strip. This is a bit of a wintry picture, so there would be a lot less snow by the time that you would be arriving here. But this is where the plane would land, and then you would meet your ship here and continue on your way. If you're flying into Antarctica and everything goes as planned with logistics, then you should have about 10 days on the peninsula before you need to be flying out after that. The trips themselves are about 17 days. There's a lot of logistics and travel to get you guys to where you need to go. And then, this lead up of spending a day in Tierra del Fuego, and also the actual transit back and forth from Antarctica. It just takes a lot of time. It's a special place and a special trip because it's tricky to get to, but it is worthwhile. Now, we have this flexibility of when we're crossing on the sailboat of checking the weather and being sure that we're going to be, in the Drake Passage when we want to be in the Drake Passage. And there is a little bit of weather flexibility that's also built into this fly schedule. I'm sure you can imagine by looking at what King George Island has to offer is that it's not your typical airport. It's run by the Chilean base, and they're very, very professional, and it's a very, very safe way to show up there. But there will be calls that will be made based on the airstrips conditions and the weather conditions and the visibility in King George Island that could either cause a delay or the flight to be moved forward, so that we'll be flying a little bit earlier. So the expedition starts as soon as you land in South America. We are going to be, flexible and ready to act on the opportunities that weather will give to us, and that's really, what expedition travel in my mind is really all about. So hopefully this sounds exciting to some of you guys, because it's making me want to go there right this second. Yeah. And then when you're actually on the peninsula, the places that you go. So if you just think about the weather system and how, again, they're often coming from the west, these weather systems. Once we're actually down into the peninsula, you can see that there's a lot of little, what maybe a lot of sailors would call little hidey holes. So there's these really kind of intimate and beautiful fjords all along the peninsula that we can tuck into. And the majority of the time that you're spending on the peninsula here should be in quite protected and relatively, compared to the Drake, flat water. Your expedition leader and your captain will work really hard to make sure that they keep you guys in the best possible conditions, and also show you guys as much as you possibly can see, right? So they can be really, really big days. There's several different research bases that are also on the peninsula. Some of them we will just view from afar. Some of them we can do a little zodiac cruise around. Every now and then we get a little bit of a radio call from a base, and we can chat and see what they've been up to as well. The most southerly point that we typically get to on these trips is down here in a place around Lemaire Channel. Some of you guys might have heard of Lemaire Channel. It's quite a famous spot on the Antarctic Peninsula. And somewhere in this region tends to be our turning point. You can see once we get further south from this yellow pin, one, you're much more exposed to the Pacific Ocean, and just the general fetch of the wind. So only coming down to this area is something that's given to us when the weather is good, but it can be quite beautiful. Of course, we're only going 8 knots at a time, so we're moving at a pace where we can see what's happening around us, and we're really kind of experiencing and being immersed in our time in the peninsula. And seeing it all in one screen here makes it feel small, but certainly it's not. You could spend a lifetime just getting to know this portion of the coast. And of course, crossing Bransfield Strait as well, coming back to King George Island. The seas here can be, um, during a crossing that we would do, maybe 1 meter to 3 meters. Nothing that these ships can't handle. The ships can do a lot. They're really built for this type of expedition. But again, us working with the captain, trying really hard to make sure that we are moving at a time that's going to be the most comfortable for everybody on board. Yeah, so that's a little bit about where we go. And for the folks who haven't been to this place, it might feel a little abstract at this point. I'm going to show you guys some more photos and maybe add a little bit more color. And then if people have photos or if people have questions, then we can come back to that. So let me try to find my slides again. Okay. So an example of what maybe it would look like crossing the Bransfield, which is between the peninsula and the Shetland Islands. This is some footage of that. So if you have good visibility, you can see land on either side. And this is about 1 meter seas. So I'm going to just play this one more time if you can see that. Yeah, so on the sailboat, you can tell that there's some movement. The people below deck would feel that there's some movement, but it's just stunning. And if you come out onto deck and you got some fresh air around you, it can be really meaningful. And when you're in more open water like that, you've got a higher chance of seeing some of our open water loving species. You higher chance for those fin whales and blue whales and albatross. Yeah, so we're always looking for those when we are away from the inland waters. Okay, moving on. Before we get into the nitty gritty, I'm going to show you guys I'll show you guys some pictures of the ship and some photos of us being out on trip. But you might be wondering when you're looking at that continent is, who even owns that thing? How does that thing even run? What time is it at the South Pole? What direction is north when you're at the South Pole? And when it comes to who's in charge of Antarctica, it is a really interesting story. So in the late 1950s, there was a creation of the Antarctic Treaty, where there's 56 different nations that have signed on to this agreement that Antarctica is going to be a place where it's going to be a place where there's peace, so there's no militarization, and it's a place where there can be cooperation on scientific efforts. So it's a place where it's not meant to be, putting flags down and saying this is mine. It's for everybody, Antarctica, and I think that that's a really kind of neat, special thing. There's not really any other place in the world that's governed specifically like this, and because of that, there are a lot of considerations that need to be made. So if we are not going to do any economic exploitation of this area, everything is just going to be scientific on what's happening on land, then somebody needs to make decisions of where all of the research stations are going to be going and coordinating some of those logistics, etc. The Antarctic Treaty also created an environmental protocol. That ended up coming into place fairly far after the fact. So we had the treaty that was signed in the late 50s, and the environmental protocol came into force in the early 1990s. And to set this, like the way that the geopolitical climate changed over that period, you can think of the 1950s. Of course, you had the backdrop of the Cold War happening and the International Geophysical Year. So there was this fear of over-militarization of spaces that haven't been formally claimed by different nations. And then you also have this opportunity to cooperate in this large-scale effort of understanding how our Earth works. And then when you get to 1990, you've got more of a mechanization of it's much easier and it's much safer to get down to Antarctica at this point. And so tourism is starting to grow quite rapidly at this point, as well as countries are starting to look at the Southern Ocean and how productive it is and trying to see if they can go down there for fishing efforts. And so there's been some laws and regulations that have put into place to make sure that there's no over exploitation of these other resources down there. In addition to that, in the early 1990s, you had the creation of IATO. So if you look at the logo on the left side, this is IATO, so the International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators. There's 120 members who have signed on to this. It's voluntary for operators to sign on to this. And essentially what it is a self-regulating body that creates extremely high standards for tourism in Antarctica. So if you're choosing to go down to this really, really special place, and for whichever reason you're not traveling with natural habitat adventures or a Lindblad, I would say, make sure that you are traveling with someone who is associated with IATO, because this really purpose-driven, what this organization has brought forward. They are training their guides on how to keep people safe in particular areas. They have site-specific regulations that will ensure that not too many people are on land at once. They have regulations that will ensure that people are not approaching wildlife too quickly or too close. They are making sure that people are not getting rid of their waste in ways that is not sustainable. And there's a very long list of bylaws that they've created. And of course, we are only signing on with ships that are really closely associated and of course members of IATO. And us as expedition leaders, we've proven to the organization that we know the body of knowledge that's required for expedition leaders down in Antarctica. But that being said, IATO does have different rules for different types of ships. So if you are in a ship that has 12 passengers or less, you're considered to be on a yacht. And that is pretty significant when it comes to your expedition planning. It means that there are many different places that you can take your people, and also that your operation is going to have significantly less restrictions to it. So every time that you bring somebody onto land in Antarctica, you need to have a certain guide to passenger ratio, and you can never have more than 100 people on land at a time. So if you're on a ship that's more than 100 people, then you have this kind of rotation of people coming on and off of shore. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, actually it's quite great for the environment. It just makes for slightly lengthier landings. And when we're on these sailboats, we can be extremely nimble. And we can do that all within the guides of being an IATO organization. So that's pretty special to me. So here's a picture of Ocean Tramp sitting beside a landing where there are many penguins to give you some scale of this image. You can see the tiny little penguin dots that are on land down there, and all of the little footprints that they've made over their time coming up onto land to find each other and to breed. Now I'm just going to start with some photos of Australis. So this is Australis. She's the one that does the sail fly or the fly sail trips. She's a very special ship. She's a sloop, and she's 75 feet. And she's got a steel hull, and she is 100% made to be down there in Antarctica. This is her with her sails up. Often Australis will do what we call motor sailing. So the engine will still be on, the sails will be up, so that helps keep the ship upright. But also you can dodge icebergs as needed if you are also under power. So yeah, you've got these 4 different cabins for your space that you could have in Australis, and you can check out this cabin layout on our website if you like. But she's quite a comfortable ship, and she can fit 7 passengers. This is her salons. This is where you'd be having, talks with the captain and the expedition leader to talk about where your next place is going to be, or maybe a presentation on any particular critter that maybe you've come across during your travels that day. And what's really cool about Australis, actually, I'll just come back to here, is that the galley is right beside where the salon is. And so you've got interactions with the chef as well, which can be really meaningful. It's quite an intimate atmosphere on these trips. We really get to know the people that you're traveling with. And to me, that's really, really, really special. Yeah. And then here's Ocean Tramp. So Ocean Tramp has a little bit of a different rig. You can see that she's a ketch, and that's just because of the configuration of her main mast and her mizzen mast. She's got her sails down right now on this particular picture. But yeah, she is 66 feet, so she's slightly shorter. And she is also very much built for this environment. So she's got an aluminum hull, and she was originally used by a very well-known climber in the Tierra del Fuego area, and has since been coming down to Antarctica to bring people to this special place. She's very much an expedition yacht in every way. You can see that her ship layout here. So we've got the 4 cabins in the forward of the ship, and then the crew live in the aft of the ship, and then the salon and the galley are kind of in very central. You come straight up from the salon into the wheelhouse, so you get to see what's going on with the captain as well. This is a picture of the salon in Ocean Trap. So on the right side, this is us doing some expedition planning, so looking at maps every day and just talking about where we're going and what's happening with the weather and what's going to be possible for us on this trip. Some of you guys might be familiar with the word expedition. Every trip that we do, we make it an expedition. We take advantage of weather and wildlife whenever we can. And I would say, like, globally, and as tourism as an industry, you kind of have this large spectrum of like true expedition and tour. And I wouldn't say that we do any real tours, but you could imagine, being on a bus and making a number of set scheduled stops, and the whole thing is probably scripted. If you come all the way to the other side of the spectrum, where you just know that you need to arrive on one particular day and that you're supposed to be back on one particular day, and everything else in between is dictated by ice, by weather, by tides, and also by what the people who are part of the trip really want to get out of it. That's what this trip is about. So once we get down to Antarctica and we are on the peninsula and we're ready to explore, we are making that trip together as a team. Like, we are one, like myself as the expedition leader, the crew, and all of you as guests. And that's a really special thing, because if you have a group of only 7 people, you can really come with the list of things that's going to really make this special to you. And within that 10-day time frame of us being on the peninsula every single day, exploring all day, we can certainly fit those things in. Example of that would be, I had a guest that came and he said, I really need to jump in the water wearing my Speedo and this funny hat. And we made an opportunity for that. Another one was, I just really want to, be by myself, surrounded by all of these mountains. I just need to find somewhere that's safe for me, just to take it all in and just have some silence. And that's also something that's very easy to do. Somebody else wanted to do, kayaking and icebergs, and of course that's almost always a part of our trip. So all of these things we can do for people. I would say on these ships, there's some myths that are out there. One myth is that it's less safe to be on a sailboat, and it's just really not true. Like, you on these sailboats, you are with world-class mariners that are really going to give you an idea of what it's like to feel and know the sea. And the cumulative experience on board these ships is quite impressive. And the ships are built to be in those places. And so really, decisions are often made more in the interest of guests' comfort while being on ship, making sure that we're not going into weathers that are uncomfortable, rather than what the ships can handle, because they can really, really do a lot. And I would say it's also kind of a myth that it's not as comfortable to be on these ships. Of course, you're not going to have like, sprawling big lounges with, super fancy cocktails that you might have on these larger expedition ships, but you do have quite a high level of service on these particular trips, because there's so many crew in comparison to the guests. So I think that people find that it can be quite comfortable. And the things that we get up to, like I said, kayaking, cruising on the sailboat, camping, and just taking a strategy to figure out when we're going to fit all of these pieces in. And of course, looking for wildlife. You guys are the wildlife people. So we're going to be finding penguins, and more penguins. There's known colonies throughout the area. Some of them are very famous and frequently visited by all types of ships. And we will go to some of those because there's a reason why they're famous. But we will also go to some other areas because there's so few of us, we can make landings in places that are smaller that maybe are a little bit more intimate with these animals. Here's some Gentoo penguins porpoising through the water there. Other things that we might do, we might go visit some historic infrastructure. So there's some old research stations that are out on the land that have been set up like standing museums, and it looks like the people who were doing research there in the 40s just left yesterday. And there are also old whaling stations where you can find, you know, old equipment from the 1800s where people were whaling out in Antarctica, of course, before the treaty was created. This is just cruising on Australis on deck. This is cruising on Ocean Tramp here. Got lots of fulmars, big icebergs. And just the general feeling of being out on the land with so few of us, I think, is just very, very special. So this is just going for a bit of a hike on some more of a flat terrain. And like I said, you know, these other ships, I'm going to show you some pictures of some other expeditions that I've been on. You get just a little bit of a different it's just a bit of a different feeling. It doesn't mean it's better or worse. In fact, I think that you can get a really, really meaningful experience through these types of trips. And you have an enormous guide team as well. You know, you're going to have 10 plus naturalists that are really specialized in particular areas. But you know, it's just something that's different. That's all. So those are some of the things that we would do on the ship. I'm gonna tell you guys another quick story. This is us cruising through the Gerlache Strait at 11 p.m. So we decided that we were gonna push late on the ship because we had the daylight because the sun's not really setting in the middle of the winter. Our winter, their summer, of course. And so we're pushing through, and then the captain pulls me up from bed, my pajamas on. He said, there's quite a few humpbacks coming up, and I think that it could be worth getting people up. And so I said, oh, well, let's do it then. So we knocked on everyone's doors and said, this could be really special. Why don't we all come up onto deck? So everybody threw on their jackets, and sure enough, we had this like beautiful yellow and purple light and humpbacks just all around us. And again, we completely shut the engines off and we were just cruising. And then again, we had this really, really intense encounter with a humpback whale that decided to come and check us out as we were just drifting. I think some people got snot in their face when this happened. Again, you know, I really think it's meaningful to tell you guys about how how special this place could be. It's hard to convey that feeling outside of sharing a special wildlife moment, but I would say it's not always the wildlife moments that are the most special to me. It's just really, it is being with the ice and being in such a remote and quiet place. But that was really, really special. Okay, another time where I woke people up in the middle of the night. This is a leopard seal. These guys are like the polar bears of the Antarctic. Again, they fully deserve their whole own presentation. I was knocking on people's doors at around midnight as well because we had a leopard seal that was singing through the hull of the ship. We could hear the vibrations of its vocalizations underwater through the hull of the ship. And that's one thing I love about these trips is that the generator at night turns off and it's fully quiet. And so if you're up on deck, you can hear the whale blows are happening far away, or in this really wild circumstance, we could hear the very alien-like song of the leopard seal through the hull. This is our captain during Christmas, who impromptu created a beard out of a towel, which was pretty hilarious this year. And yeah, just us really bonding over camping out on the land. We found a really nice place and some good weather to do that. And so that's always lucky when we get a chance to do that. I could tell you guys stories forever, but yeah, like I said, it's really the solitude and the ice and the history of the ice, I think also that really sits with me when I visit this place. You can see the layers of snow here building up over time. You know, and the glacier, the icebergs that are coming and calving off of the glaciers that are spilling over from the center of the ice sheet. You know, you could be looking at ice that is hundreds of thousands of years old. And that's a really, really, really humbling feeling, if you ask me. Here's a picture of a landing called Spigot Peak. Again, another kind of lucky impromptu thing that we were able to do, where we landed after dinner, sun setting. We had the energy to go walk up a hill. So we walked up this really nice trail hill to the top of Spigot Peak, and this is the deckhand just standing there looking out onto the water. And I'm just going to play this short video of it panning, but you can see all of those footsteps from the large ship that came in before us. So there was quite a busy place recently, but when we were there, it was just us. Yeah, you can hear the chinstrap penguins in the background. So that's looking out onto Gerlache Strait there. Yeah, and I think I'm getting close to the end there because I wanted to leave some time for some questions. So maybe I'll just say this. You know, there's some people are intimidated by going to this place because they see big open water and sailboat and, oh, I can't do this. And just know that you don't need to know how to run a winch to do this trip. You know, there are some physical requirements like walking on uneven ground and being able to climb a short ladder to make sure you can get on and off the ship. And if you really do want to run the winch and drive the ship, just be friends with the captain, and I'm sure he'll let you do it for a minute. But yeah, it's a trip that is accessible to people who want to feel real nature. And I've been thinking about how to convey this to you guys, and I think the best way to do it is just to say, you know, the way that we choose to travel, like the actual vehicle that we use, and we choose that to travel, the way that we choose to travel, it really does, it shapes your experience. It has the ability to shape the experience. And even though we don't know what you might end up seeing down there, that's kind of the magic of it. You're just in the path of the magic, and the realm of what could unfold is just so big. And for me, I think that's very, very special. Yeah, so I'll leave you with this. Some experiences will deliver you to Antarctica, but if you're on a sailboat, it lets you enter Antarctica. And that's all I'll say. Thanks, Rob.
All right, Marlo, thank you so much. Now, before we dive into the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that if you do have questions, you can submit them via the question field in your control panel. Just go ahead to the upper right-hand corner of your control panel. You'll see 3 lines there. They call that the hamburger. Go ahead and click on that hamburger, and it'll drop down the menu and click on questions. All right, so let's get to some of these questions. So can you give us an idea of how a typical day on the ship runs, Marlo?
Sure, yeah, I could definitely do that. So, a typical day on the ship would be we would start at anchor. So, we like to have the anchor down at night because, of course, the crew needs to sleep as well. And we could wake up for a breakfast, maybe 7:30. We have breakfast where we can kind of just pick at granola, chopped fruit, yogurt, and then coming in half an hour, 45 minutes later, we're going to have a hot breakfast. So maybe we're going to have some scrambled eggs or some pancakes available. And so we really get to kind of ease into the day. And when all that's happening, there'll be coffee and tea, and people can kind of have the deck to themselves if they'd like. And people can join as they also wish. After breakfast, we'll do a briefing about our activities for the day and what our intentions are going to be. And if we're at anchor where we are intending to explore, then we might end up dropping the kayaks in the water. Those folks who have traveled on the water know that the mornings can be really nice and calm sometimes. So we drop the kayaks, maybe we'll kayak from the ship and along the shore in a certain area, or go and check out some icebergs, or go look for some seals, and come back to the ship, pull up the anchor, and then move from that location to somewhere else while having lunch underway. And maybe we find along the way we're looking for whales, and we have some whale encounters, or we're just enjoying the scenery, or we have a little presentation that's happening below deck, or people are napping, depending on how we did the day before. And then usually we would intend to have an activity later in the day. So we try to chop up our transit so that we can get off the ship twice. So maybe our second location for the day is going to be adjacent to a penguin colony. So we put the anchor down, we gave everyone a briefing about the penguin colony. This is where the density of the nesting sites is going to be. And this is where IATO says that we can walk and where we should not walk because we might disturb certain nesting birds. And then we will disembark everybody onto the Zodiacs and Zodiac everyone to land, and then we'll do landing for truly, I mean, the best part about this is it can be as long as people want in a way. But, let's say about an hour and a half, 2 hours of that landing. We could walk around, take pictures of penguins, interpret behavior, and then come back to the ship. Ship's still at anchor. We could have uh, a happy hour happening when we arrive. So we'd have, some wine and some beer available, some little snacks, and then jumping into dinner at that anchorage if we so choose. And then the following morning, we would just pull the pick in the morning and maybe go somewhere else. And so that's a series of things that you could do in a day. But everything's weather dependent. If it's a really nice day, you might have to throw in jumping in the water at some point. But yeah, that's a typical flow is breakfast, activity, lunch, transit, activity, happy hour, dinner, everybody rests and the ship is quiet. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Marlo. And how many people are on the ship actually, between guests and crew and guides?
Yeah, so you would have in your maximum capacity, you would have seven guests, and then you would have your captain, your mate, your deckhand, your chef, and then your expedition leader. So you'd have your 5 crew to your 7 guests. We don't always fully fill up these trips, but yeah, if we did, that would be your ratio.
Great, thank you. And so how far south does the trip travel? Can you actually circumnavigate Antarctica?
Yeah, so the trip does not circumnavigate Antarctica, and I can't think off the top of my head who you would be able to do that with actually if you wanted to. The trip will go to this little yellow marker here. So this is the area of the peninsula that we're seeing. And again, it takes a long time to move around this landscape, especially if you want to see it. And we're moving about 8 knots. There are some larger vessels if you're trying to get very, very far south that will do, say, trips from this continent and then coming over to either Australia or South Africa. And in doing that, you have to cruise pretty fast. And it's really difficult to be close to land because everything that's south of this marker is very poorly charted. So it's difficult to bring larger ships in close to land past that point. It can be done, and there are ships that have some very good, private charts and local knowledge as well. But there's a reason why this is a place where the majority of people are touring. And so it's one, accessibility. Two is because there's less sea ice also close to the land, so that it's easier to actually make landing and maneuver boats safely there. There's more physical land exposed because remember, 98% of the continent is covered in ice. So coming down to some of these other areas might be completely inaccessible to make landings, as well as your penguin colonies start to become very, very sparse as you get south of that point. Um, yeah, and so this would be a really big trip. You'd have to definitely block out, a month plus of your life to go out and do this. We are just staying on the peninsula for our particular sailing trips. I know that Lindblad does trips to South Georgia, and they've been known to come into the Weddell Sea as well. And this area is extremely remote and quite different ecologically than the other side of the peninsula as well. How's that for an extended answer?
That was a terrific answer. We appreciate that. So does Nat have trips in the area to South Georgia or the Falklands or anything that can be combined with this trip?
You would have to go on to a Lindblad ship to do those. And probably for a fairly good reason. I mean, it's a lot of time in open water to come out to these areas that you just mentioned. And so for the sailboats, it's better for us to just, cross and then be on the peninsula. I have heard of people doing expeditions from Ushuaia to South Georgia on a larger ship and then back, and then coming on to the yachts to kind of have a more intimate experience when being on the peninsula, for sure. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So, can you talk about clothing for a second? What we should
Yeah.
bring and what we don't need to have on the trip?
Yeah. Well, certainly one of the most key pieces of gear is going to be extremely good waterproofs. Yeah, because we all know, being outdoorsy people, that if you get wet in cool temperatures, then it's going to be really tough for you to be able to warm back up. And so Gore-Tex pants and Gore-Tex jacket is very, very critical. Now, you don't need to bring every single jacket that you own. Sometimes the temperatures can be easily in the 40s, maybe dip into the 50s a little bit. I've also had times where it's in the 30s and, freezing. Uh, the way that people dress, if you're coming from Florida, might be a little bit different than if you're someone who's coming from the mountains per se, but they are temperatures that are safe for people to be out during the times that we are. So yeah, I say bringing merino wool layers and down layers that can fit underneath your waterproofs and waterproof gloves. Those are the key pieces of equipment. Binoculars,
Got
never forget those.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Is camping overnight on the peninsula possible? Is that something we do?
It is something that we do, and if we can, we could try to do it on the actual continent, because as you saw when we looked down at the peninsula, that there's many little islands, but it's cool. You get a little bit of an extra badge, don't you, if you end up camping on the continent itself, right? And we are very strategic when we're doing this. We want to pick a location that is beautiful and flat enough, and opportunity when the weather is good. So we're not just going to pitch the tents in on any old day. But the guests also get to dictate a little bit of, well, a lot of what they want to do on this trip. And so if you show up and say, I really want to camp multiple times on this trip, then it could be something that is put on the priority list for the EL and the captain to try to sort out how they can coordinate that. Yeah, but usually it's once in the opportune moment of the trip, and it's pretty fun. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. What about if we're there early or late in the season? Any chance of seeing southern lights?
Oh yeah. Later in the season would be better. Coming into later February, you're starting to get into times where you're going to have more real darkness or getting close to real darkness. But southern lights are really tricky to see. So I'm going to show you guys something. So in terms of latitude, right? Like we're kind of between 60, 65 and 66 around here at this most southerly point. And the aurora oval for the south is quite tight to the Antarctic mainland of the continent. And so if you just have an ambient amount of energy coming from the sun, then it's not something that you would necessarily see on any given night. But if you had, a big solar storm and you were there quite late in the season, then I don't want to rule it out as a possibility, but it would be quite unlikely, but it could happen. Yeah. There are some trips that will go like on the sailboats. We try not to go too far into the shoulder of the season, so I'm talking like March. And in March, you would certainly have some real night happening there and some slightly better chance. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Marlo. Well, we're just about out of time, but I just wanted to ask you one last
Yeah.
thing. Is there one part of this trip or one specific site either that you've seen or you can't wait to share with people?
Hmm. Oh gosh, that's so hard. I just love them all, and the light and the conditions are different every time that you're going to every place, aren't they? Um, let's see. If we get a chance to come down here to Lemaire. So I'm telling you guys that this is our most southerly point where this little pin is, and Lemaire Channel, that really famous place. It's famous for a reason. When you come out of Gurlash and all of a sudden you feel like you're very south and you're very exposed because we have, you know, the maybe a little bit of swell coming in from the Pacific. And then you tuck into this crazy narrow channel where the mountains are all around you and you just feel like you're in this wild, wild wilderness. And I really love it down there. But it's just the feeling of being in this region on that day, if we can. It doesn't happen on every trip, you know, you need good weather for it. But um, certainly we have sights set on that every time we go down there to give it a shot.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Marlo. Unfortunately, that
Yeah.
is the last question that we do have for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for your closing comments.
Oh, yeah, I'll just say this is that I hope that I get a chance to see you all out in the field, and this place is truly magic, and I hope that I was able to do it a little bit of justice, but I'm happy to answer any questions going forward that you guys might have. So thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Marlo, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel to Antarctica with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen, which is 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us Monday for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.